Hi, I'm Penny Simkin, and I'm here today with Melissa Bangs, who is a playwright and many other things. And we're going to be talking about a play that she has written called Playing Monopoly with God and Other True Stories. And this is a nonfiction storytelling performance about something very dear to my heart, which is becoming a mother, and then some of her experiences with intense emotional postpartum journey. And we're going to be exploring that together today. The good news is that there's a lot of humor in this, and she shows us how humor can be embraced in the midst of pain. So, Melissa, tell me a little bit about your performance. Yeah.
We start with the birth of Adelaide and sort of those first sacred, just ethereal, beautiful moments, and my slow transition to not being well in the world. And I take the audience on a journey with me to full-blown postpartum psychosis with mania, to an inpatient psych ward. And you journey with me and my family in Adelaide there. And you also get to come home with me when I come home really reeling with a bipolar diagnosis, on lithium. I can't feel anything, completely numbed, having anxiety attacks and insomnia. And you get to come with me to on my journey to wholeness, back to whole health. And the story is one that in the journey thus far, men and women, young, and I would say young as in childbearing age. I've had people as young as 16 and 17-year-old moms in the audience, and I've had people in their early 90s in the audience, but men, women, young, old, parents, non-parents have really related to this show because it is about the human journey.
It sounds as though the biggest message is it's really realistic to assume that you're going to recover.
Yes,
and you can demonstrate that in that.
Yes, and my story, Penny, was one of these extreme cases where 5% of moms will end up in a psych ward, 0.1%, 1 in 1,000 will experience postpartum psychosis, while a reported 15 to 20% will experience a postpartum or perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. And that is, of course, the reported numbers. And we know because of shame and stigma and fear, thousands, or don't tell anyone, never tell a soul. Yeah. I think one of the fears and misconceptions, both for moms and their partners, and even within the mental health community in some cases, is that when you have a postpartum mental health experience, that it isn't a temporary chapter. I walked out of the psych ward with a bipolar diagnosis for life. I was told not to go off lithium. My story is not uncommon. And as I've met hundreds of women who have had their own journeys, whether it was with postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression, panic, you name it, postpartum bipolar, there's so many that, the assumption was in their medical journey that this was a state for life. And for many, it's not. For some, it is. And in bipolar specifically, about half will go on to be bipolar in their life in different ways, and, treat that and sort of dance with that in very different ways, and about half will not be.
Okay. So what led you to the decision, having gone through this, being in that experience, what led you to the decision to do this performance and pour your energies into this?
Well, it's so interesting. There are a few things. One is, there actually is, so when I got out of the psych ward, so I gave birth at 40. I had never had a panic attack. I'd never experienced depression. I'd never had a blip in my mental health. And at 40, I'd really come to depend on my mental health. It's something I had always had. I really took it for granted, took my brain for granted. I, on that road to recovery, ordered my medical record, which is really big, from the psych ward. And somewhere around page 87, there was a note that it was a nurse's note, scribbled late at night, and it says, patient says she will do comedy on this experience. And when I read that, I just laughed out loud, and I thought, I bet they changed my meds at that point. They thought, this isn't working. This mix of meds isn't working. But they couldn't have known what I knew. I was, psychotic at the time, and yet there was a thread of truth in that I did do improv comedy at Upright Citizens Brigade in New York. Amy Poehler was my homework. She was my ninja. I studied with some of the best, and when I left New York City to go home to Montana, I'm fifth generation Montanan, leaving improv was one of the saddest parts of leaving New York. And I never could have guessed that the next time I would do comedy live on stage, I would be sharing the most excruciating thing I have yet experienced in life. It wasn't the plan, but I knew, even psychotic, I knew. And I think I also knew well, when I was well and whole and in the state, that laughter is so healing. And one of the pieces that came up when I arrived home, many friends of friends, family, visited for, a month or two. And time and again, as I would sit down with a mom who brought food or wanted to hold Adelaide while I took a shower, every woman had her own postpartum story. And it was extraordinary to me and unsettling to me how many of them would say, I've never told anyone this, but, and I thought, wow, did it take me going to the loony bin for me to be a safe place to share your story? And so I think, Penny, it was about the 20th friend telling me that when her second was a baby, she had seen herself hanging from the kitchen rafters for 9 months and never told a soul. I was the first person she was telling. At that point, I thought, if I'm a safe place because my case was so extreme, I'm going to tell my story from a mountaintop to as many people as I can, with as much self-acceptance, self-love, and really, forgiving myself for it all, as a way to make room for more moms to share their stories.
And it's had a positive impact.
Thank you.
Gotten that feedback already. Is that
yeah,
correct?
I have.
Yeah.
I have. I've actually, in the journey, nearly 2,700 people have heard my story so far. We did a tour all through Montana where 13 shows, 10 sold out, 3 were packed. We've done Postpartum Support International, their national conference in San Diego, Dona International's conference in Bellevue. We're currently on a 9-city West Coast tour for a year up and down the West Coast. And I continue to hear everything from, well, I've at least a dozen times now heard either you saved my life or you saved the life of a friend. I've heard people say again and again that they healed something in hearing the story, something new, something very old for them that they've been carrying for a long time. I also, probably the number one comment I've heard many times is I was laughing or crying the entire time, which is pretty wonderful.
Well, it sounds as though you have found a way to make a very stark and frightening condition accessible to people so that they can hear about it and take the positive message from it,
Yes.
rather than being devastated and hurt by
Yes.
it. And that takes quite a skill.
Thank you. I really thought a lot about that balance of the comedy and the tragedy within my true story. And, I thought, if I get up on stage and tell a really sad story, which I could, about my experience, a certain audience would come. But there would be so many that would never come or would walk out or would shut down because it would just be too much. And so, humor is one of the ways that myself as a person, that I survive things that are tough in life. It's a part of my resiliency toolbox. And, laughing helps you breathe. But I will say that I think the humor, too, makes this story more universal, and that many more kinds of people find an appeal and are drawn to it. And I thought the humor would make the story bearable But I had a dear friend say, I asked this friend who's a beautiful writer, I said, one of my goals with the humor is that you never find yourself doing this in the hearing of the story, so that when the tough truths come, you're open, you've just been laughing, and so it's you've heard it all before you can do this again.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, you definitely did that. Yeah. I mean, I was wide open when you delivered some of those tough truths. Yeah. She said, but I also felt like the laughter made me feel as if you were holding my hand on the journey, and you were saying, hey, we're going to go to this dark corner, but I won't abandon you there. We'll just be there for a minute, and then we'll leave. We'll go somewhere else.
Yeah, very good, very nice. I wanted to ask you, what do you hope will be you got a year long, a year devoted to touring and providing this performance for people. What do you hope will be the end result of all that?
Well, Penny, I have so many goals. One is, one of my mantras is, if my story does nothing else, may it unleash yours. And, I just hope, I also say and so deeply believe that if my story were about me, I would have been bored telling it a long time ago. And it is because my story is one of millions, and we all have them. We all have our stories. And whether it's a postpartum psychosis story, a postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, whether your story is cancer, your story is bipolar, depression, divorce, death of a loved one, it's like, in the human journey, we all have these moments where the bottom drops out and there's no instruction manual. And we have to find our way back to ourselves with no ground and no map. I think, too, because maternal mental health and mental health in general are such taboo subjects where there's so much shame. And it's so easy to isolate ourselves because of the stigma and the shame and the fear. My hope is not only will many moms and dads, 1 in 10 dads experiences a postpartum mood or anxiety disorder. My hope is that moms and dads will feel permission to tell their stories, and whether they tell them to themselves with clarity and no filters and forgiveness and self-love, whether they tell them to each other, to their partner, their family, or in a more public venue, just that we begin to share them. And I think I have this vision that this story will be one of a multitude of efforts happening around the world that leads to a time when our postpartum stories and our mental health stories are as common as our birth stories and our love stories.
Yeah. What you're doing is opening the door, shedding some light on a taboo topic, and making it palatable, perhaps, in ways that it might not be if the humor weren't there. And your very personal passion also would carry a great message, I would think. Yeah, well, it just seems like this is something that our viewers ought to be looking for. And you're going to be up and down the West Coast, and then who knows? Well, thank you so much for this, and thank you on behalf of many people who are suffering with their postpartum mood disorders and other difficulties. I think you've lightened their spirits a little bit.
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And before we go, Melissa, will you tell our audience where they can see you, where they can get tickets, what performances you'll be doing, etc.?
Absolutely. So at the moment we're October 2016, right? So this month I have a performance at the Postpartum Support International's 2-day certification course in Montana, which I was lucky enough to be a part of helping bring to Montana in partnership with the State Director of Public Health. And they are funding that, which is awesome, DPHHS in Montana. So that's October 20th. And then on the 26th and 27th of October, I'll perform at Town Hall in Seattle. And people can check out the review and trailer and get tickets online at my website, which is www.playingmonopoliwithgod.com.
Okay.
I will say, too, if people want to follow the tour, as we're up and down the West Coast, and we're in Portland and Salem and all the way to San Diego, And we're kind of up and down through the year with our final show so far planned in Portland, August 2017. They can go to my website, which I just gave the address, playingmonopoly.com, and those dates will be posted as they formalize. They can also like Melissa Bangs on Facebook, or I guess become my friend and like Playing Monopoly with God, and there you'll see postings for shows coming up. If you want to bring me to you, you can email me, and that all my information's on my website. We can talk about that.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.